Hi everyone, this is Professor Van Ryzen. This is the first in a series of videos about assignment number 3. I'm going to just begin with the instructions and some of the materials for the assignment. Later videos will walk you through the various parts of the assignment. In this assignment, we're going to use UN Human Development Report data from 2011, and we're going to use that data to identify a potential cause and effect relationships between two variables that are of interest to you. So you're going to pick the variables, and then you're going to use Excel to do essentially three things. You're going to plot a scatter plot of the relationships, graph the relationship, and add a linear trend line to the graph, which will help you spot the linear pattern. In step number 2, you're going to run a simple regression, bivariate regression, and interpret the slope, statistical significance, and R squared. And then in the third part, you're going to identify a third variable that may be a potential common cause of your X and Y variables of interest, the ones that you've chosen. And then you're going to control for this third variable using multiple regression analysis, and then compare the difference between what you find from the multiple regression and step 2, which is the simple regression. Okay, and then you're going to summarize all that in the form of a memo so you can practice writing about this kind of analysis, and be sure to discuss the strengths and limitations, because there are many limitations to this kind of analysis for demonstrating cause and effect. And yet it still has some advantages too, because at least you make an attempt to control for common causes. So that's the gist of the assignment. You should read it carefully yourself. You'll need this data here, which is in an Excel spreadsheet. I also put up a link here to this page on the UN website about the Human Development Reports, and this gives you a way to help identify the meaning of the variables. Some of the variables are self-evident, others you may need a little help interpreting. So I put that link up there to help as a kind of code book for the data. But let's begin by looking at the data. I'm going to just open this up. This is the Excel file. Okay, here it is. Okay, you can see there are countries of the world in this second column here. This is the so it's country level data. The variables are labeled in the first row up here, and some of them are fairly intuitive or self-evident. Life expectancy at birth, mean years of schooling. Expected years of schooling might be a little confusing. I'll show you how to find that out. There's gross national income per capita. It's a measure of income. There's a gender equality index that might require some reading to figure out what that means. And maternal mortality ratio, again, that may you might need to look into that to figure out really how to interpret the numbers. That's the question. You want to know how to interpret these numbers. That becomes very important in the regression analysis. Let's say if we look over here at life expectancy at birth, we need to know, for example, that 65.4 is years of expected life. And of course, mean years of schooling, 4.4, 4.4 years of schooling. It may not be so clear with something like the maternal mortality ratio, and so on. So it's some of the numbers, in order for you to really interpret them clearly, you'll need to investigate them, and I'll show you in a minute how to do that. Let's see, I think I mentioned there are about 120 countries in the data set. I left out some countries with a lot of missing data, but still, if you go over here, you see that there is still some missing data in this data set. And the implication there is that if you're doing an analysis with some variables that have missing data, when you go to run the analysis in Excel, you're going to highlight only the cells that have complete data. You're going to have to leave out countries with missing data. Excel doesn't handle missing data well. More specialized statistical software can handle missing data better, but in Excel you're just going to have to restrict the data yourself. Okay, so that's the data set. So I mentioned some of these variables. Well, let me just give you, before I go to the UN website to show you how to read some of these variables, let me just give you a sense of what's in here. You can see there's some education variables, economic variables, gender equality, over here, some savings variables, some environmental variables, which are interesting, although some of those have missing data. There's life satisfaction as a variable. Satisfaction with water quality, population growth, some demographic variables, foreign direct investment, some investment variables, public expenditure variables, and I think that's about it. So let's see. So there's quite a lot to work with, and I'll show you in a later video about how to pick a good X and Y variable to start with. But let me show you. So let's say we have a question now about what the meaning of expected years of schooling is. Where do we find that? Let me just reduce that. If we go back here, we can go to this UNHCR indicators website. Let me just go into there. There it is. I'm going to go down here. Now, basically, it's a page on the UN website where they have all kinds of indicators in tables. If you go down further, there are these are the what's called here the Human Development Trend Data by Indicator. That's really the indicator by indicator list of results. So here's where you can really find each of these indicators. And let me just show you, let's see, the one that I had a question about was the expected years of schooling. There it is. So what does that mean? Down here there is the mean years of schooling. That makes sense to me, sort of the average level of schooling in the population. But what's the expected years of schooling? So let's click on that. And we get this kind of table here, which, let's see, I'm going to have to move this in a bit so you can see it. Okay, there it is. Now, what you can see here is, now this is the only way I know how to kind of look up what these variables mean. If you click on that, as I just did, that expected years of schooling, you get a table like this, and it seems confusing with all these buttons. But if you look right up here, right where I'm highlighting, it gives a definition, and I can even click here to expand it, right? So it says, what is expected years of schooling? It's the number of years of schooling that a child of school entrance age, so maybe that would be, what, 6 or 7, can expect to receive if prevailing patterns of age-specific enrollment rates persist throughout the child's life. So that's sort of, expected years of schooling is sort of the level of education that someone entering the school system currently could expect to receive, and that differs from mean level of schooling. Let me just go back to that, because mean level of schooling basically includes older people. Mean years of schooling is really just over here. We can see it again at the top of this box up here. There's the definition. It's the average number of years of education received by people under ages 25 and older, converted from education attainment levels using official dimensions of each level, blah, blah, blah. So this is really the average level of schooling of all people in the society. So it includes older people. In fact, it's 25 years and older people who've finished their education. And that means, someone in their 60s or their 70s, grew up in a very different time in the country, and they may not have had as much schooling as someone who is just entering the school system currently and what they're expected to receive. So that's the difference between, again, here, let me go back to the data here. So that's the difference between these two variables. So all of that is just to say that when you before you really begin doing the regression analysis, and let's say you've picked your variables and you're getting ready to do the analysis, it's very important to study these variables and know what they really mean. And so I know this is the average years of education for people who are 25 and older in the society. This is the years of schooling that is expected of someone who's newly entering the educational system. And the same is true if you have questions about gross national income, what that means, or what the gender equality index means, or the maternal mortality ratio. The point is, you get a general sense of what these variables mean, probably enough to decide which one you think might be a useful X and which might be a useful Y. But before you actually start running the analysis, take your two variables that you've investigated and really look them up to make sure that you know what the numbers mean. Okay, so let's see. I think let me reduce these two, or let me just go back to Blackboard. Okay, so that's it. Those are the instructions to the assignment. So the very first part is really to pick an X variable and a Y variable of interest to you, and that involves some conceptual steps. So I'm going to do that in the next video, and then we'll move on to the work with Excel. Okay.